Welcome back to this WBNG TV Action News Special Flood Summit 2008. How can we better control and reduce the impact of flooding? A recent summit in Binghamton brought together experts from across the state to answer that very question. It starts with managing the watershed. The DEC's Assistant Commissioner for Water opened the discussion. Let's take a listen.
What you have to do is think in terms of land use patterns that don't amplify the effect of floods. And that means not putting sprawling development wherever possible, but taking into account this whole school. If anybody Googles better site design, up will come report after report after report of how you build up rather than out and build in a way that retains the water on the environment. And that's good for water quality overall anyhow, but it's also certainly good for attenuating peak flood events. Protect the natural resources that act to hold water on the landscape. The Croton portion of the New York City watershed had a wetland remapping. We found 12 square miles in a 370 square mile area of completely unmapped wetlands. Now, if you think at it from a purely civil engineering standpoint, that's 12 square miles of holding tanks that operate during a flood event. It's huge. It can take a power washing and hold the water slowly, and then again attenuate that peak flow and that peak flood. So when anybody wants to build in wetlands, even small ones, town supervisors, planning board people, try to get them to not do that. Those wetlands are very valuable, and some people claim retrofitting an acre of impervious surface can be, $20,000, $30,000 in some cases for the ponding, the construction that does it, when the wetlands are already there and doing that job. Floodplains. Maintain the floodplains. Don't fill them. And also, when you're going in and doing the stream work, don't cut the stream off from the floodplains. You all have seen this. During high water, the water moves out, it spreads out, it's held on the environment, and it slows down. And that has benefits right down through the whole stream system. Again, thinking of ways of holding water on the landscape, any which way you can. People start thinking about it, you'll just see the connections, and do it in 100 times, 100 and even 1,000 times throughout a major watershed. You're really adding up to something that can mitigate that peak flow, and that's where you get the real harm. No responsible government official allows new development in a floodplain. You're putting people in harm's way. It ain't right. Don't do it. When developers come forward and say, let me do it this time, let me get in there, it's valuable property, it's a project, it's good for ratables, you have to suck it up and say no. All right? That's really what you have to do. And wherever possible, pull people out of floodplains. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I wouldn't let her live in a floodplain. And I don't know of anybody responsible in government that lets their kids and their people and their citizens reside in floodplains if there's some option and some way of getting out of it. Now, protect the stream meander. All of you are familiar with a stream meander, that sinuosity, that S-curve. Well, connect point A to point B through a straight line. And we've seen people turn streams into a cement chute. Rip wrap, straighten it out. Let's get it out of here. That's good drainage, right? The first rule of civil engineering back in the 60s was drainage, drainage, drainage. Right? Nice straight cement, build it, go that way. Well, that actually is a bad way of going. That's counterproductive. You want to maintain that stream meander, because if you connect point A to point B with an S-curve that meanders all over, think about it. That operates like a big storage tank, right? It holds more water on the environment. It slows the water. So don't straighten those streams. Don't turn them into cement chutes. Maintain those floodplains and maintain those connections, those riparian wetlands and those headwater wetlands, which are incredibly important. And avoid unnatural dredging. As you'll hear today, if you dredge in a way that creates berms and goes into an unnatural stream design, you end up doing more harm than good. Because streams are meant to move base load. They're meant to move sediments in a natural, move fairly big rocks, frankly. So after a storm, you see the rock cobble on a stream. Well, after a storm, that's new rock. All the old rock, that's a mile downstream. And so it moves during the flood event. It's a dynamic equilibrium is what the experts call it. And seek to hold water on the landscape with respect to the built environment. Wherever you can, with what you have now, everybody, my father would make me build the dry well when I was a kid, and set the roof gutters into it. Build those dry well type structures wherever you can. Small ones help.
When flooding strikes, limiting the damage and loss of life hinges on our ability to respond. When Flood Summit 2008 returns, we'll hear from the Response and Rescue Panel how emergency responders and local governments can be ready to act quickly in the face of flooding. You're watching Flood Summit 2008 on WBNG TV. Welcome back to this WBNG TV Action News special, Flood Summit 2008. Saving lives was the goal of the search and rescue portion of the Flood Summit. More importantly, how local, county, and state agencies need to work together to react quickly and efficiently, from managing people to resources. The chief of the New York Office of Fire Prevention and Control kicked off the discussion.
And really there's two pieces. One is the planning preparedness efforts that need to be ongoing and need to be reinforced and need to be strengthened, as well as our emergency operations component. One of the keys that we're finding, at least within the State Fire Mobilization Mutual Aid Plan and response, is the planning, is a hazard identification component. We need to identify where our hazards are, what our situations are, what are our problems. So when this water rises, what is going to be the key, what is going to be the 3 or 4 or 5 different items that are really going to give us the biggest headaches, and plan accordingly for that. Key facilities need to have identified not only those hazard places, but also facilities of where we're going to stage, where we're going to shelter, and all those pieces, and also key staff. Undoubtedly, you always never have enough people, I guess. You never have enough folks in the right position. It's really been helpful in a lot of cases, and a lot of folks in a lot of counties look at kind of expanding that pool of trained personnel. Maybe utilizing some non-traditional roles, utilizing management staff from other governmental entities or county agencies that may not necessarily be emergency responders per se on a day-to-day basis, but have managerial skills and can be plugged into the system, and then providing whatever training that will help them with that. We kind of need to look further to expand that help, and we need to have depth in those positions, because undoubtedly whenever the problem occurs, the key guy that you're looking for is vacationing in Aruba at the time. So we need to make sure that we have depth in those key positions and those and providing. And we also need to be able to relieve those folks. Emergency responders, and I know that during the Broome County incident there were countless folks that were involved in operations and were continually in command or in heavy operations for extended periods of time. And they need a break. They need to get spelled. The person cannot physically operate for 24 hours plus and still be sharp and be right on. So we need to make sure that in our planning process we have that ability and that depth, so that we have each position's covered 2 or 3 deep, so that we have that ability to do that. Resources. It's a resource game, and that's really what it comes down to, is having the stuff to throw at the problem, and trying to figure out what that stuff is. Knowing what we have currently, knowing where our weaknesses are, where our gaps are. I applaud Broome County for increasing that swift water capability, and I'm sure that that's happening in a lot of other areas as well. But you need to kind of base that, and you need to know what you have and what you can build and increase from that, and know what your neighbors have, and know what is out there. The office currently maintains a State Fire Mobilization Mutual Aid's resource inventory listing, which is a web-based system which provides that basis, and we're currently in the process of upgrading and increasing that capacity and the information that's contained on that, so it aligns with some of the federal standards. So it gets a good start for us to be able to compare that, and counties will have access to that information as we move forward. Plan. Brett had mentioned the use of the incident command system, and I'm sure Tom will recap on that as well. That was key in 2006, having the system that's in place, that a management system that can control all these resources. And many times your folks and emergency responders, they may not run across an incident of this magnitude, this type, of this complexity once in their careers, or twice in their careers. So the system needs to be in place so that they're comfortable with how to work through that. And again, incorporating all aspects of the community. We have to look outside of the traditional roles and use everyone that we can available. And as I mentioned before, it's resource management, resources. It's a resource game. We need to have the structure in place to receive resources, to deploy resources, to track resources, to support those resource needs. Because when you bring in hundreds of emergency responders and you bring in all of their equipment and all those supplies that they need and the fuel that the vehicles need to operate in, and some place for them to be sheltered when they're not working, and feeding them, 3 hots and a cot, basically. Those things need to be set up and need to be tracked. It's not as simple as just bringing them in. They're not going home in 2 hours. They're going to be there for several days. So we need to make sure that process and that system's in place. Tracking resources, deploying them. Are we deploying them effectively? Are we putting the resources that we have in the best place? It has to be constantly evaluated, constantly reassessed. We may need to reshuffle. We may need to remove some resources from one location, put them to somewhere else. But those are the kind of constant evaluation that needs to occur. And then the other key is if you're the one that are sending the resource, if you're the provider, provide what's requested and only what is requested. Oftentimes the folks in their willingness to assist and be helpful will expand the request from 2 units to 4 units, and while the intention is good and they understand that folks want to help, it compounds the issues when you try to support those additional resources. So please, if you're on the sending end of this, send only what is requested.
The June 2006 flood sparked the 3rd largest use of manpower for disaster response in New York history. The State Emergency Management Office Deputy Director for Response says while immediate search and rescue efforts are vital, we also have to think long term.
But to be truly effective, we have to, from the earliest point, be able to look at about 8 areas simultaneous and concurrent with life safety operations. And I'll just very briefly go through those. Life safety concerns is always first. Long-term health and safety issues, including disease vectoring and those things that we talked about with hazmat. Hazmat creates far greater problems than simply the debris in the water and the problems with debris removal. We need to look at human needs, sheltering, temporary housing, all of those things that we want to get started as quickly as we can, because we need to get people back to some semblance of normalcy, or at least some comfort, as quickly as we can. We need to look at the ability of government to continue to operate and our agencies to continue to operate. So COOP and COG is extremely important. We need to look at our infrastructure. We need to look at the economic impact and how what we do in response can quickly look to mitigate against those losses and develop a plan that will, as best we can, continue to foster the local economy and to move forward so that we don't have these devastating losses that cause communities to virtually implode. So that is another concern. And the last 2 that we have to consider is social stabilization and environmental remediation. But if we wait to look at those till we are days and weeks into these major events, we've lost significant time, and ultimately our villages lose, our towns lose, our cities lose, our counties lose, and most importantly our people lose. That's why teams like this that can assist local government in managing the situation, provide that support, provide that platform, are as important to the overall success of the operation, if not more so, than the individual component parts that you heard today.
February's Flood Summit at the Binghamton Region C wrapped up with a call for action. When Flood Summit 2008 returns, we'll tell you what one man is calling on the governor to do and how state leaders say it's an idea well worth looking into, and how you can review the entire Flood Summit at home on your computer. We'll be right back.